welcome to this week's Hong Kong Heritage, where movie buff Phil Kenny talks me through the films and TV series that have used the recently deceased Jumbo floating restaurant or some of the more historic floating seafood restaurants as the perfect Hong Kong backdrop, or even gone inside to make it a command centre. Spider-Man was shot with a tranquilizer gun and fell into the Aberdeen harbour from the top. Not sure if that was before or after he climbed up Jardine House from the outside. There was Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan movies, but also French, Japanese and German productions.
The disclaimer is that my knowledge of local movies is fairly rudimentary. It's sort of limited to Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee films, which brings me into how I got into this. So the reason why I started getting into film locations was because as a young boy I was fascinated by Bruce Lee and Enter the Dragon, because that was the only film that they ever showed in the UK when I was growing up. And just seeing all these locations in Hong Kong, and I really wanted to go and just be there and see what it was like. So when I came over in 2006 now, actually, one of my first objectives in my spare time was to try and track down all these film locations.
From Enter the Dragon.
From Enter the Dragon, yeah. So it was like a boyhood goal to visit all these places that they used, assuming that they were still around anyway. And that developed into an interest in film locations in general. And then I started seeing a few more local films, like the Jackie Chan films and things like that, and I would find locations for those as well, and it just kind of ballooned into that. But I'd noticed that there was quite a few other people doing a similar thing, so I thought, well, I don't really want to go over a similar thing that everybody else is doing, so I thought I'd spend my focus on foreign movie productions that came to Hong Kong to film, of which Enter the Dragon could be classed as that, because it was a joint US and Hong Kong production, the very first one, in fact.
Roper, Williams, and Lee, the deadly three, penetrate the secret chambers of an evil island empire.
What do you know about Han? He lives like a king on that island, totally self-sufficient.
A fortress without walls, protected by an invincible army that needs no ordinary weapons. This is Enter the Dragon, the first martial arts film produced by a major Hollywood studio. John Saxon is Roper. He was in it for the money. U.S. karate champion Jim Kelly as Williams. He was there because he had no choice. Black Belt Hall of Fame undisputed martial arts champion and international film star Bruce Lee. His job was to get them out alive.
I'm hoping you'll join us, represent us in the United States. You want me to join this?
Roper, Williams, and Lee. Just when they think they've broken the secret of the island, they find there is no escape from the inscrutable Han. Warner Brothers presents Enter the Dragon, where the world's greatest martial arts athletes meet the ultimate challenge with the most ancient and deadly of weapons, the human body. Enter the Dragon from Warner Brothers.
So I just started researching and finding all these films that, expecting there to be maybe 20 or 30, something like that. And I'd uncovered really what is a treasure trove of all these films that were filmed throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, less so in the 90s, a few more recently as well. I think one of the main things that I found was the way that, without really intending to, they documented a lot of the older Hong Kong, which is also what I was interested in.
Oh yes, definitely. If I watch, say, for example, Love is a Many Splendid Thing, or The World of Susie Wong, I mean, the actual story is very dated.
Yes. There
are some tropes and cliches and worse in, and the choice of also, Jennifer Jones, there's all sorts of things that have changed, say, over the decades. But in terms of, as I agree, seeing the old cars going up the hill, there's a whole variety of scenes, yes, that are very interesting to look at of old Hong Kong.
Yeah, the benefit really for these film companies coming over was that they were shooting in colour a lot of the time. Not always, but, things like you say, Love is a Many Splendid Thing, Soldier of Fortune, that was shot, I think, 6 months before that with Clark Gable. They were all filming in full colour, which the local film industry hadn't really started using yet. There's the tale of the Bruce Lee film, The Orphan, which was filmed in 1959 which was the year he left Hong Kong to go to the US. There'd been a black and white version of it in Hong Kong, but apparently they'd sent the negatives off to, I think, the Rank laboratories in London to have them developed in colour. And apparently this reel sat in the Rank archives for many, many years, until the head of the Hong Kong Film Archive went to London looking for films and said, you know, do you have any Hong Kong films that we can take back to Hong Kong? And she found this colour negative of The Orphan, which was filmed in 1959. Now, I don't think it's ever been on general release, but I think you can watch it at the Film Archive. But again, it's, you know, like this colour film of 1950s Hong Kong. I mean, otherwise, the only place where you can see this kind of footage is on home, you know, people who were rich enough to have a camera at the time and film. You know, there's lots of film on YouTube, but obviously it's very kind of amateurish, I guess. It's shaky, and sometimes you can't necessarily see the detail. But these earlier films captured Hong Kong at a time which now is just completely unknown, really, I think, to most people. So Love Is a Many Splendid Things, Soldier of Fortune, and then The World of Susie Wong, as you said. So it's actually great. You know, one of the things that appeals to me is trying to track down these locations after so many years, because a lot of times they've completely changed, or buildings have been demolished and replaced on 2 or 3 more occasions.
So in the same way that they do the Sun Yat-sen Heritage Trail, do you think that we could have a few movie trails, you know, here this was shot?
You know, I think it's really a missed opportunity with the tourist board here. I think there's a lot more film tourism here than they actually appreciate. Most of the interactions I have online are, you know, similar-minded people. You know, I love coming to Hong Kong and seeing all these old locations and this kind of stuff. I'm sure other cities do it, but Hong Kong has a foreign film history in Hong Kong going back to the early 50s. Yeah, it's definitely something that I think they should really look at, especially if they want to encourage a little bit more tourism following this pandemic situation.
Now, William Holden and Jennifer Jones, they go off on a very romantic evening. They're off on the sampan to go to a brightly lit seafood restaurant. And the funny thing was that it's based on a book by Han Su-yin, the Dr. Han Su-yin, and she actually says that it wasn't as romantic as that at all, because she had a whole bunch of kids in the sampan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've not read the book.
Yeah, so she wasn't quite looking in William Holden's eyes at that point. So, yeah. But just if we can have a timeline on the Jumbo, I mean, would that have been an earlier incarnation of the Jumbo, or was that a different seafood restaurant?
It wasn't an early version of the Jumbo. It was actually the Thai Pack, the original Thai Pack, which I believe was launched around 1952, something like that. It's quite difficult to pin down the dates.
How do you launch a seafood restaurant? I mean, is there a sort of like, do you whack a bottle of champagne on a rope? Does Princess Margaret come? Or?
I wonder if it's like when they open a new shop here and they have like the flower boards, and they have a like a lion dance or something like that. Yeah. I don't really know. Because
I'm also trying to, I mean, I'm completely going off the storyline now, but I mean, just with the Jumbo now, I mean, is that a barge? You know, it's 73 metres or something excessive. So is it... I mean, what would you class it as?
I don't know.
I mean, people were saying a vessel, and I was like, well, it's not a ship, but I suppose it is of sorts.
Well, I mean, even when it was in Aberdeen, it was on piles, wasn't it? It was on wooden piles. It wasn't actually floating. You know, so my only other experience of a floating restaurant in Hong Kong is the concrete Sha Tin one, which is like a homage to the old Sha Tin floating restaurant, which was a very, very similar design to, you know, the ones in Aberdeen. But you rarely hear anything about it. It was on a French film in 1964.
But with the demise of the Jumbo, I mean, it's been very interesting to look at the different types of floating restaurants that we did have here in Hong Kong. So the first one is the Thai Pack.
Well, I think there was another one before that called the Yulei Thai as well, which was around the same time when the Thai Pack started. And I think that was very much a local affair. Because the floating community in Aberdeen, I guess they needed somewhere to celebrate special occasions and things like that. But the Yulei Thai was a very basic one. And the original Thai Pack in 1952 was also quite basic. It was just like a boxy thing, you know, with, I think it was 2 floors surrounded by a kind of veranda, I guess. And then the restaurant was inside.
I mean, because the Jumbo was fantastic. I mean, it's much later, opened by Stanley Ho in 1976. Yeah. But you're saying there's an earlier incarnation of the Jumbo.
Well, OK, so the Thai Pack was in 1952, and then later in the 50s was the Sea Palace, which you will have seen on The World of Susie Wong. It had like a golden roof, and it was modelled on the marble boat in the Summer Palace in Beijing. It kind of had like a curved prow and like fake wooden paddles on the sides. If you look at pictures of I think it's called the Sek Fong in Beijing, it was burnt down in the Second Opium War. It was originally made of wood, and then they rebuilt it in the last dynasty, made out of marble. And the Sea Palace was based on that. And so it was a whole level of ostentatiousness above the original Thai Pak. And I think what it did, it kind of upped the game to try and attract customers, I guess. Because it wasn't long after the Sea Palace arrived that the original Thai Pak, the small boxy one, it was moved to Chue Mun, Castle Peak Bay. And it was replaced by the triple roofed version that we're more familiar with today. You know, that was kind of them competing with the arrival of the Sea Palace, I think.
I mean, I know with the Jumbo that there was a beautiful carved dragon. There were some superb items within. So I hope that didn't all go down with the ship.
I don't know. I mean, it would be such a shame if it has, yeah.
Yeah. I know that they took the engines out, but I don't know what else is being preserved, because there was that great dragon neon as well. So I think for me as a heritage person, along with the insurance investigation that must be done properly, I think, and the licences that it was allowed to leave under in Hong Kong, I think it would be useful for everybody from a heritage perspective to know what was on board or not. And I think also it's really shown the reactions from people in the past couple of weeks to it being floated out, the people who turned up to wave it goodbye. It shows that, all the different types of heritage that we have in Hong Kong, and this sort of what it means to different people, and just having it there in Aberdeen. Back to the films. So in terms of the Jumbo itself in the mid-1970s.
Yeah, so the original Jumbo was due to be launched in 1971, October 1971, and I think it was 2 weeks before its opening date, there was a catastrophic fire.
When the Jumbo was adding the final decorations on the 30th of October 1971 for the opening ceremony of the Aberdeen fishing village, a welding spark caused a massive fire. Photographs show the floating restaurant going up in an inferno. The Alexander Grantham fireboat also joined efforts to put out the fire. The 4-deck structure was engulfed in flames within minutes, and 34 people were killed. The restaurant was eventually rebuilt and opened in 1976.
After they put the fire out, they just towed it to the side of the shelter and just left it there. So it burnt in October 1971, and then in 1973, I think it was either February or March 1973, when Warner Brothers were in Hong Kong to shoot Enter the Dragon with Golden Harvest and Bruce Lee. There's a scene where all the actors meet on a junk in Aberdeen Harbour in preparation to go to Hans Island, and one of the shots is you can see the junk coming towards the camera, and in the background on the left hand side there's the collapsed wreck of the original Jumbo. So I don't know when it was eventually completely removed, but a year and a half later it was still there at the side of the typhoon shelter with its collapsed roof and burnt out husk and all this kind of thing.
So movies really do document different parts of our Hong Kong history.
Exactly, yes. This is it. This is the fascinating thing, Often when I watch these films, I'm not really paying attention to the story at all.
Well, that's me too.
I'm just looking at the locations.
Just as well sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But
would you be up for an Enter the Dragon tour, Phil?
Yeah, no problem at all. I've spent a lot of time looking into that film, so I know pretty much all the sites. Yeah.
Around Hong Kong?
Around Hong Kong, out in the new territories as well. They went everywhere. I think Bruce was trying to show his hometown to the best for foreign audiences. I think he did it quite well. Certainly got me hooked. That's probably one of the reasons why I'm here now, really.
So Enter the Dragon.
Enter the Dragon, yeah, we can do an Enter the Dragon tour, but we might have to get a car because they're very spread out. Yeah.
See what we can do.
Hire a taxi for the day. Yeah.
So Stanley Ho opens the Jumbo restaurant that we know today in 1976. So what movies have been on there or featured it in more recent times?
Surprisingly, actually, not many films have used it as an actual location. There's been very little filming actually on Jumbo. Obviously, lots of people film in Aberdeen because it was just this portrait of local Hong Kong colour that people wanted to capture, whether it was the boat people or the floating restaurants or whatever. But there's been a ton of films that have captured it in the background. I think the first one was 1978, Oliver's Story. Actually, they did film on the Jumbo. It was Ryan O'Neill and Candice Bergen. The story is they come over because Candice owns some factories for her fashion company or something like that, and they come over to have a look, and they're having a heart-to-heart on the Jumbo, and you can actually in the background you can see the Thai Pak and the Sea Palace. So they must have been on the Jumbo because that was the only one that was there. That was in 1978. I think the main production that utilised the Jumbo the most wasn't actually a film, or it wasn't originally a film. But I don't know if you remember the late 1970s, The Amazing Spider-Man series with Nicholas Hammond.
Oh no, I didn't think you were coming up with that. No.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, obviously everybody knows Nicholas Hammond from The Sound of Music because he was one of the Von Trapp children.
Oh right.
Yes. And in the late 70s,
so he wore curtains as shorts or something.
Well, in
permanently damaged.
Yeah. Well, in the late 70s, he became Spider-Man. He was, the Spider-Man that I grew up with and the Spider-Man that I loved. Even though
did you try and stick your way up walls? With webs?
I used to jump off walls, and I had a little Spider-Man like movable doll and all this kind of stuff, and that was because of that show. But what they did, they made an extended episode of the show called, I think it was called The Chinese Web, and basically they filmed it all in Hong Kong. I think it was originally a 2-part show or something like that, each one like a feature length. But what they did, because of the success or because they wanted to recoup their money in some other way, they edited the 2 episodes into one feature length film, and they actually gave it a theatrical release, and it was called Spider-Man, I think it was The Dragon's Challenge. I don't think it's had a DVD release, but it's definitely on YouTube. You can watch it there. And they filmed extensively on the Jumbo when it was actually parked right up on the waterfront. It wasn't in the middle of the harbour. For some reason, it was parked on the waterfront, and it was basically the venue where the bad guys kind of get together and do all their business. And there's a scene where Spider-Man sort of infiltrates, and he's climbing all over the Jumbo, and then he's shot with a tranquilizer dart, and he falls from the very top of the Jumbo into the harbour. And, this is in the 1970s when the floating city was still there, before they'd moved them into the government housing surrounding. And the stuntman who did all of Nicholas Hammond's stunts, dressed up in the Spider-Man suit, he climbed up the side of Jardine House, Connaught Centre at the time, and all this kind of stuff. There's a scene with him climbing up the side. It's very impressive. Well, the stuntman was a chap called Fred Waugh, and he took one look at the water in the Aberdeen Harbour, and he says, "There's no way I'm falling into that." So apparently they had to get a local Chinese stuntman to do that particular stunt, because none of the American stuntmen would do it, because it was just so dirty. The water was just so dirty at the time. But that, I think, is the most extensive use of the Jumbo as an actual filming location for most of the other films that came to Hong Kong. They filmed in Aberdeen, and it became part of the background. So they did kind of get it in there a little bit. I mean,
jumping right to more recent times in 2011, I know in the movie Contagion, which is partly shot here, that Gwyneth Paltrow stars, and she apparently catches whatever this big bug is called from a chef at Jumbo. And this astonished me more from the fact that Gwyneth Paltrow of Gloop would eat. I thought she'd be like on seaweed smoothies.
Yeah. I must admit, I did read that, and I have seen the film. But, the interior of the Jumbo, I mean, you could recreate that in a studio. I don't think there's any, it's nice to know that they did actually film inside, but there's nothing really in that film that tells you that it is the Jumbo unless you read the credits. But I guess before that, there's the Noble House series.
So what was that?
Okay, so Noble House was the serialisation of James Clavell's sort of rather exciting novel about 1960s Hong Kong. And I think it was set in 1963 in the book, but when they filmed it with Pierce Brosnan in the 80s, they brought it forward to the modern time. This is where James Clavell used real Hong Kong history and sort of wove it into his story, because there are 2 striking disasters in his book. One is the burning of a floating restaurant, and the other one is the collapse of the tower during the rainstorm at the end of it. I hope I'm not spoiling it for anyone. They did film the exterior shots.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, oh sorry. But anyway, there's one scene where they have this dinner party on this floating restaurant, and in the book, I can't remember what it's called, but in the series it's called The Flying Dragon or something like that. And, you know, the place catches fire, and the two main antagonists, I suppose, are on board, and one of them rescues the other one and all this kind of stuff. But that was obviously based on the 1971 burning of the original Jumbo. For the exterior shots, you know, they as they approach the floating restaurant, they actually filmed in Aberdeen. You know, the Jumbo, I think they changed the sign to make it into Flying Dragon or something like that. But I believe the interior shots and the bit where it actually burns, the set that they used for the burning was on a film set somewhere. I don't think they shot that in Hong Kong. But certainly the approach, you know, you can see the Jumbo. So that's the only other time I can really think where it figures significantly, albeit under another name. The thing with films, they can be a little bit tricky. There was a 1981 film with Klaus Kinski. It was a French-Japanese production, so you can kind of imagine the content that's in the film, but it was called Les Fruits de la Passion. And in that movie...
Well, I don't know what I'm imagining there.
Well, in that movie, you know, you see Klaus Kinski on one of those little shuttle boats that, you know, ferry you to and from the shore to the restaurant, and you see him approaching the restaurant, and actually the one that he gets onto is the Thai Pack. You see it looking out rather than looking towards the Thai Pack. But when the film sort of used the shot of where they are, you know, the establishing shot, they use the Jumbo, so it's kind of there in all its glory.
What happened to the Thai Pack?
As far as I know, I haven't been to Aberdeen for quite some time, but I did ask someone to let me know, and they said that the Thai Pack is still there. It's looking a little bit decrepit, apparently. Some parts are falling down a little bit. But I don't know why that wasn't towed. I don't know, because obviously, yeah. Well, for me, you see, the Thai Pack is a lot more historical, because that version of the Thai Pack has been around since well, not that version, but that Thai Pack has been around since the original was 1952. So at least the name has been around for that long. I think the version that's in Aberdeen right now has been around since the 70s. But as far as I know, you know, because it was all part of the Jumbo Kingdom. You know, in the 1990s, we were talking about the Sea Palace earlier. Well, the Sea Palace was replaced in, I think it was 1990 or something like that, by a new version. So I don't know what happened to the old one. It just disappeared, much like the Jumbo has. When it was incorporated into Jumbo Kingdom, they brought in a whole new version that was more similar in design to the Jumbo itself. And that one was around until, I think, 2000. And then they towed it to the Philippines. Thankfully, that didn't sink. And it stood in Manila Bay, I believe, for about 8 years as the Jumbo Palace, I believe it was called. Apparently in 2009 or 10, it was then towed up to Qingdao in China, where it sat in Qingdao Bay for several years as well. I don't know if it's still there.
So it does show that it can be, these restaurants can be towed across the open ocean.
Exactly. I mean, you know, the Jumbo Palace was a lot smaller, it has to be said. It was about half the size of the Jumbo, the proper Jumbo. But yeah, you know, it made the trip from Hong Kong to Manila, and then from Manila all the way up to Qingdao in North China, really, isn't it? It's near to the Korean Peninsula, I think. So yeah, I mean, it can definitely do the journey. So at one point they had all three restaurants. They had the Sea Palace, or the Jumbo Palace, they had the Thai Pack, and they had the original Jumbo, all connected together as the Jumbo Kingdom. And there's a few films that you can actually see all three of them, I think, shot probably throughout the 80s. There were several films that shot scenes in front of them, such as The Protector, which is a Jackie Chan film, which is why I'm quite familiar with it. They shot quite a lot of scenes in Aberdeen, but there's a really nice...
So what, is he the protector?
He is the protector. Not the protector, the protector.
Now, New York has a new weapon. He's a cop with his own way of enforcing the law. His own way of fighting crime. Meet New York's new weapon. Jackie Chan is the Protector.
But there was a really nice establishing shot of Aberdeen, or at least the Shumwan part of it, where the restaurants were, with Ablé Chow in the background, with nothing on it. You know,
amazing!
Yeah, I mean, you look at it now, and it's just high rise after high rise. But back in 1985, it was. You can see them doing the kind of the formation work for what was going to be there, but for the most part, it was completely clean. Yeah, so you can see all the 3 restaurants there. And then later in Bo Derek film in 1989, Ghost Can't Do It. It was a John Derek film about her husband who dies and becomes a ghost and inhabits another person's body so that she can find, you know, a partner for her to grow old with.
When we talk about international films, of course, it doesn't mean that they're all English language by a long way.
No, in fact, one of the most common countries or production companies to come over here was Constantin Films, which is a German film production company. I know you speak German, so do you want me to butcher a few German names for you as well? Well, there was we were speaking earlier about the original Thai Pack. When it moved to Castle Peak Bay, you can actually see it in that state in a 1963 film starring a guy called Brad Harris, who was an American stuntman. He came over to Hong Kong quite a few times to shoot films, but this German film was called Weiße Fracht für Hong Kong.
So white?
I have no idea. I have no idea. But it's basically about a couple of airline pilots who come over to fly a plane for someone. They find out that they're actually being employed to smuggle drugs. Yeah, so and
they say that costs extra.
Yeah. No, they're very righteous and they try to investigate what's going on, and it gets them into trouble. But that's another good film with lots of old locations that you can't see anymore, like Eucliffe in Repulse Bay.
Oh, of course, yes, the castle.
Yeah, they're captured and put as prisoners in Eucliffe, and there's a really nice shot of the side of Eucliffe as they break out and swim away across Repulse Bay. But they filmed a scene when they're walking around Hong Kong, actually, and it's honestly, it's almost like they did the the Trail Walker, because they start off in Sai Kung and they walk through Shek Kip Mei and then they finish in Tuen Mun. So it must have taken them pretty much most of the day, but when they finish in Tuen Mun,
did they beat the Gurkhas?
I don't think they did. And they finish up having tea in the original Thai Pack that was at the time in 1963 was in Castle Peak Bay, and that was the original kind of boxy one that I was telling you about. That it wasn't really sexy enough for Aberdeen anymore, I think, once the Seapost arrived.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, what was this movie with Gérard Depardieu?
Okay, in 1995 there was a French production, Les Anges Gardiens, Guardian Angels, and they filmed a significant amount in Macau as well, actually, Macau and Hong Kong. And there's scenes in Hong Kong, they're being chased by gangsters whose HQ is the Jumbo restaurant. So they take all their victims back by boat to the Jumbo, and they kind of throw them into the bilge tank in the bottom of the Jumbo.
No yum chow for you.
No. But so that's another film that actually did use the film as a proper location rather than just as background scenery, which I think most films really just used it as, because it looked nice from the outside, and so it was always kind of in the background somewhere. The same year, there was a Japanese film, a Godzilla film, Godzilla. Godzilla versus Destroyer.
Who won?
Well, in that movie, it's kind of the opening credits when you're introduced to Godzilla. He kind of pops up in the middle of Victoria Harbour as a plane is taking off, and they have to quickly veer the plane out of the way as he pops his head out of the water and starts, firing his lasers.
Oh, it's going to be the next thing. I mean, we've had COVID, there's possible monkeypox now, Godzilla coming out of the harbour. Yeah,
well, just after the Victoria Harbour, he then pops up in Aberdeen Harbour as well. So he's,
So do you have all these sampans going all over the place? Or?
You have as I was saying, the 3 brightly lit restaurants, because it's at night time, so they're all lit up.
My thanks to Hong Kong movie locations buff Phil Kenny, talking me through some of the movies and television series that have featured the Jumbo floating restaurant and other more historic floating seafood restaurants. The German movie Weiße Fracht means white cargo, so heroin in this case. Thanks for listening, and join me next week on Hong Kong Heritage.